Welcome back to another episode of the MiniBrute Cookbook tutorial series that I'm doing. Today's episode is the dynamic lead line by J.M. Blanchett. It's a lead sound on which the velocity is controlling the metalizer amount. Increase the mod wheel / aftertouch to add random modulation to the filter. So kind of sounds something like this. So, let's get into it. As always, let's start from a neutral patch. I'm gonna undo all of this. Move those out of the way. We'll do that down, that down, that down. Well, actually, that needs to go there. That can go there. That can go. That's probably part of my problem, honestly, because it didn't seem like it was getting the exact what I needed, and that was probably that. Okay, cool. So the first thing we want to do is, obviously, as always, get some tone going, right? So we're going to use the square wave oscillator and the triangle on oscillator 1. You can hear we already got some tone because I left it in high pass mode. Yeah, that's the other thing. If you're not hearing any tone, chances are you have it in low pass and your filter's all the way down. So you can either open your filter, or since this recipe needs the high pass filter instead of the low pass, just put it on high pass and you'll start getting tone. And then obviously your tone will change based on where your filter position is. So while we're on the filter, let's get the resonance going. And that's just to give a little more spice to where the filter's kind of sitting, right? Now, the recipe also prescribes, the recipe also calls for some attenuator 1 up. However, we're going to kind of adjust that to taste later, so we're just going to leave that alone for right now. While we're in the same spot, we're just going to kick that brute factor just a little bit, because it's not doing much. It's just kind of adding a little bit of spice, so we can kind of add that now. That's not a big deal. So now we got a tone going, okay? Let's open that filter just a little bit, okay? Now, we have a bunch of modulation stuff going on in VCO1 over here. So let's get that sorted out, because this is kind of where a lot of the sound is coming from. So we're going to want to hear what's happening first before we go messing with the matrix and modulating the modulation. You understand what I'm saying? So first things first, right? We need a little bit of glide, just a little bit. If you were paying attention in my last video, I totally forgot how glide worked for a couple minutes and was like, this isn't working. And it took me a minute to realize what was going wrong, and I'm just an idiot. But now you can hear what glide does. The higher the glide is, the longer it takes to sweep from one note to the next as you turn the glide up. And so I'm sitting here hitting the same key and nothing's changing. I'm like, it's not working. So make sure you understand what you're doing before you go doing it, because I just had a total brain fart and totally forgot. I'm probably going to cut all this part out anyway. But we're going to add a little bit of glide. Just a tiny bit, just for a little bit of movement, right? I don't like a whole lot. That's probably good there. So we're going to add a little bit of pulse width. Just a little bit, just to put a little bit of zing on top. You can probably very faintly hear it starting to just kind of start to get a little on the top, right? If I open up the filter, or not open up the filter. If I turn the square wave up a little higher, then you can really hear what's going on there. But because we only want, half of the square wave and almost all triangle, it's subtle. So you can really use it to kind of dial in the exact timbre that you're looking for. While we're on the oscillators, I just remembered we're supposed to have a little bit of the noise oscillator as well. And we're going to use oscillator 2, but it's basically to reinforce the square wave on the bottom. So let's get that sorted out. So there's that noise oscillator. It's a little too much, if you ask me. That's good. So now we add oscillator 2 in, and we'll pitch it. We'll pitch them together. I like to do this in fine mode instead of all. Yeah, I like that. Yeah, if I'm trying to match the two oscillators, the tone, I'll use oscillator 2 in fine mode instead of all mode. If I'm trying to like pitch it down, I'll do it in all. Because even though in fine you can go down an octave, I don't know. I just like all better. I like all better. I don't know. Okay, so where are we at here? So we got some. I mean, it's a decent sound already, but we can make it a little more interesting, right? So what we're going to do next is we're going to jack up the pulse width modulation. And you'll notice it's already pre-wired to LFO1. So you can really hear it. What's going on there, right? So that's kind of what we're looking for out of the square wave, except just a little bit of movement, right? Not like craziness, okay? So now let's get that triangle back up. Okay. Now we got the metalizer. Now the metalizer, it's hard to describe exactly what the metalizer does, but what it does is involves stacking the wave back on itself and phasing itself back out. So you get this weird sort of, let me turn the square wave off for a second. You get this sort of stacked harmonic modulation going on. Or this stacked harmonic thing going on, okay? So now we're going to use that, but we're going to modulate what's happening there. Now you'll notice that the metal modulation is pre-wired to the velocity, so we don't have to do anything for that. And if you notice, the harder you hit your note, the more modulation, the more metalizing modulation you get, okay? So since that's already pre-wired, we don't have to do anything else with that. That's, nice and keeps things pretty straightforward for us. So let's get that square wave back up. We got our pulse width set how we want it. But now we're going to start making things different. How? Well, first off, the LFO1 that we're using for the pulse width modulation, we're going to take that out and we're going to take it over to the voltage controlled amplifier mixer. Oh, not mixer, the VCA over here, voltage controlled amplifier or attenuator amplifier. I forget which one it is. So we're going to take LFO1 out into the VCA in. All right. We're going to take the control, or we're going to take out from the pressure into the CV, which is the control voltage. Okay. And then we're going to take the output of the VCA into the attenuator 1. And so now what's happening here is LFO2 goes into the VCA. The pressure for how hard we hold the note, or how hard we're the aftertouch basically, or mod wheel, depending on which, depending on which model of the MiniBrute you have, is so whatever your modulation source is controlling how much of LFO1 goes into attenuator 1. Now that's pre-wired to the cutoff, hence why we didn't touch it yet, because we want to figure out what we want it to do. And if we turn it up, now you can hear LFO1 doing its thing. So now what you can do is so now let's draw our attention to LFO1, because now we can change the the wave and the rate and all that kind of thing. So what we're going to do, instead of on the default sine wave, where it kind of wee like just smoothly up and down, we're not even going to use triangle or saw or square. We're going to go down to the random, or sample and hold, I guess is what it's technically called. And now, I like to play it like a little bit lower so you can actually hear it a little easier. If I go a little bit lower, you'll even hear it more. So the harder I hold down on the pressure, the more it allows LFO1 to open or close the filter in accordance to where it is, right? So if I hold it down, or if the other thing is the velocity affects that metalizer, right? So this is low impact, and then I'm going to hold pressure, so. So you can hear how if I'm light on it, it stays low. But if I jam down, it allows the LFO to sometimes get into a spot where you can hear it, right? So now, depending on what register you're going to be using this particular patch in, you might want to go higher or lower with your attenuator 1 and your cutoff, right? So if you're going to use this higher up, then you want to be able to, fine tune this so that way, you know, the movement of the filter kind of coincides musically with what you're trying to do, and it sounds all pretty and nice. Okay, so this is the dynamic lead line, we missed a step. First of all, I left the oscillator 2 down. Now, the other thing with oscillator 2 is you want them to be pretty closely aligned in frequency. But you hear how if I just turn it off, oscillator 1's pretty static. If I turn it back up, there's like a phasiness in there somewhere, right? So that's because they weren't perfectly tuned together, and they're still not, but that's a little bit closer, I guess. You're never going to get them perfect though. That's the thing about, you know, using analog gears. It's never going to be perfectly in sync with each other unless you were to synchronize them, which is what we're going to do. So we're going to take the output from oscillator 2 into the sync for oscillator 1. And then we get some, you know, it gets a little more aligned and it seems a little more, you know, on time, like on with itself. So now, because they're synced, now we can turn the VC or the frequency modulation up on. We can turn the frequency modulation up on VCO1 because they're pre-wired to be synced too. So LFO2 is frequency modulating LFO1 at audio rate, but then synchronizing the actual frequency with each other too. So it's like. So what I like to do now is to take the ADSR out. Sorry, I got real close to my mic there. Take the ADSR out, put it into your FM. And now you can adjust the FM without it throwing off the pitch of what you're doing. If you don't do the sync thing, then it just gets weird. So enable the sync, then you can use the ADSR to affect the, you know, the FM, and then you can really tune it in. And make some really cool, like almost 9 Inch Nails-y kind of bass lines and things like that. So yeah, so that's basically the dynamic lead line, and you know, how to use it as a lead, and then how to make it weird to use it as a bass, and you know. So I hope you enjoyed. I hope you play around with it, have fun, experiment, be a good person, put light into the world. Okay, bye.